They said, my mother didn't look like she belonged there. They said, a woman like her couldn't possibly be the rightful guest in that suite. And when she tried to explain, they called security. What they didn't know, what they couldn't have known, was that her daughter was already in the parking garage, still in uniform, and she had just gotten off the phone with the hotel's regional vice president. This is the story of what happened next. The morning of September 14th was the kind of crisp, gold-edged Saturday that makes Atlanta feel almost forgiving. The dogwoods along Peachtree Street had turned early, shedding burnt orange leaves onto the sidewalk in lazy spirals. Eleanor Voss-Drummond, 71 years old, dressed in a cream linen blazer and pearl earrings she'd owned for 40 years, stepped out of the rideshare and stood for a moment at the entrance of the Hargrove Grand, a hotel that had opened the previous year and immediately became the address in Buckhead. She smoothed the front of her blazer. She adjusted her purse strap. She was there to check in early. Her daughter had arranged everything. The suite on the 22nd floor had been booked 11 days ago, paid in full, a birthday surprise that had made Eleanor cry when she found out. 60 hours in Atlanta, a spa appointment, a dinner reservation at a restaurant so exclusive that the waiting list had a waiting list. Eleanor hadn't stayed in a hotel like this since her late husband, Colonel Wendell Voss-Drummond, had taken her to Washington for his retirement ceremony 22 years ago. She walked through the revolving door and into a lobby that smelled of white tea and money. The front desk was staffed by 2 agents. The younger one, a boy who couldn't have been more than 23, glanced up from his screen and immediately clocked Eleanor's age, her worn purse, the slight stiffness in her right knee as she crossed the marble floor. His eyes made a decision before she opened her mouth. His name tag said Colton. "Can I help you?" Colton asked. Not warmly, the way you ask someone who's walked into the wrong store. "Good morning." Eleanor set her purse on the counter. "I'm here to check in. Reservation under Drummond Voss, the Magnolia Suite." Colton typed slowly, his expression shifting from bored to something more guarded. He squinted at the screen. "I don't see anything under that name." Eleanor blinked. "My daughter made the reservation. It may be under her name. Colonel Simone Drummond Voss." Colton typed again. He clicked something. He leaned slightly away from the screen, the way people do when they don't want you to read what they're looking at. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to ask you to step aside. I have other guests waiting." Eleanor turned around. There were no other guests waiting. The lobby was quiet. A bellhop was polishing a luggage cart 40 feet away. "Excuse me," Eleanor said softly. "There may be an issue with the reservation." Colton said the word issue, the way people say it when they mean problem. "I've already decided is your fault. I'll need to verify the payment method before I can proceed." The room was paid in full. Eleanor kept her voice even. She had learned, across 7 decades in the American South, to keep her voice even. "My daughter's confirmation number is ma'am." Colton held up a hand. "I appreciate your patience, but I need to contact my manager. If you'd like to have a seat in the waiting area." He gestured toward a cluster of chairs near the window, the chairs they put people in when they want them to feel small and temporary. "I can come find you when we have more information." Eleanor looked at the chairs. She looked at Colton. She looked at the other front desk agent, a young woman with a sleek ponytail who had heard all of this and was studying her computer screen with tremendous focus. Eleanor Voss-Drummond had grown up in Macon during desegregation. She had raised 3 children while her husband was deployed. She had buried a son at 38. She did not sit in the temporary chairs easily, but she was 71 and her knee hurt, and she had learned a long time ago that the battle worth fighting is the one with staying power. She sat down. She pulled out her phone and sent a text to her daughter. "Something's wrong at the front desk. They can't find the reservation." Colton disappeared through a door behind the counter. He came back 4 minutes later with a man in his 50s, dark suit, silver cufflinks, the bearing of someone who managed by intimidation. His name tag said Gareth Fenn, general manager. Fenn walked toward Eleanor with the brisk, slightly regretful energy of someone dealing with an inconvenience, not a guest, an inconvenience. "Mrs." He glanced at a paper in his hand. "Drummond?" "Voss-Drummond." Eleanor stood. At her full height, she was 5 feet 4 inches. "We've run into a bit of a complication." Fenn clasped his hands in front of him. "The reservation in our system was made using a government-issued purchasing card, which typically requires additional documentation and in-person verification by the cardholder. He said this with the particular smoothness of a man who knew he was in grey area, but also knew that most people wouldn't push back. Since you're not the cardholder, my daughter made the reservation. She is the cardholder. She will be arriving within the hour, be that as it may. The room is paid for. Eleanor's voice, still even, had acquired an edge now. I can see the confirmation on my phone. The transaction cleared on September 3rd, 11 days ago. Fen looked at the phone she held out. His expression didn't change. Ma'am, I understand your frustration, but our protocol requires. I would like to speak to someone above you, Eleanor said. A beat of silence. Fen's jaw tightened, just slightly. I am the general manager of this property. Then I'd like to speak to your regional director. That's not a call I can facilitate on a Saturday morning. Then I'll wait, Eleanor said, right here, until my daughter arrives. Fen excused himself. He walked back to the desk and had a quiet, rapid conversation with Colton. Eleanor watched them the way she had watched men make decisions about her for 71 years. From across a counter, from behind a desk, in the small brutal theatre of rooms where people with less power are expected to defer. She didn't defer. She sat, and she waited, and she kept her back straight. What neither Colton nor Fen knew was that Eleanor's text had been read 30 seconds after it was sent, and the person who read it was pulling into the parking garage, beneath the Hargrove Grand, at that exact moment, in a dark green government vehicle, still wearing her service dress uniform after a morning briefing at Fort Gilliam. Colonel Simone Drummond Voss was 44 years old and had served 22 years in the United States Army. She was currently assigned to the Army Judge Advocate General's Corps, stationed at 3rd Army Headquarters. She was 5 feet 10 inches tall. She had the kind of stillness that people who have managed real crises develop. Not calm exactly, but compressed. Everything contained and directed. She read her mother's text once. She typed back, "Don't say anything else. I'm walking in right now." She crossed the lobby in 8 seconds. Eleanor saw her daughter before Fen did. She watched the lobby doors open, watched Simone in her uniform come through without breaking stride, and felt something release in her chest. Not relief exactly. Vindication. Fen had his back to the door. Colton saw Simone first. Colton's eyes tracked the uniform, the oak leaves on the shoulder, the ribbons above the breast pocket, the JAG insignia, the stride, and something moved behind his eyes. Colonel Drummond Voss. Simone addressed Fen's back. Fen turned. He saw the uniform. He saw the rank. His face went through a rapid, involuntary recalibration. "Good morning. I was just assisting you were refusing to check my mother in." Simone didn't shake the hand. She stepped past him to the desk. Reservation number 774-Kilo Golf November. Government purchasing card. Army JAG Corps accounts. Transaction posted September 3rd. Confirmation sent to this property's reservations email the same day. She placed her phone on the counter. Screen up, showing the confirmation. The Magnolia Suite, 2 nights. Check out Monday. Colton looked at the phone. He looked at Fen. Fen was recalibrating again, visibly this time. The switch from inconvenience management to guest management was happening in real time, and it wasn't graceful to watch. "Colonel, I want to assure you there was no intent to. My mother is 71 years old. She has been sitting in your waiting area for..." Simone checked her watch. 26 minutes, while your staff questioned the legitimacy of a prepaid reservation. "The reservation is on your screen right now. It has been on your screen since Colton typed it in the first time." She looked at Colton when she said his name, and Colton went very still. "I'd like to know why it wasn't processed." Fen opened his mouth. "I'd also like to know," Simone continued, her voice exactly the same volume it had been since she walked in, "why my mother was directed to the waiting area rather than being offered the standard early check-in process while the reservation was verified." The lobby had gone quiet in that particular way. Lobbies go quiet when everyone present is pretending not to listen very hard. Fen straightened his jacket. "Colonel, these things do sometimes require, yes or no," Simone said. "Is the reservation in your system?" "It is." "Is the payment confirmed?" "It appears to be." "Then check my mother in." She picked up her phone. Now. The check-in took 4 minutes. Colton's hands moved quickly. The key cards were coded without comment. A porter materialized from somewhere and took Eleanor's bag. Fen hovered at the edge of the desk with the miserable energy of a man who understood that something had happened that would not simply end here. He was right. Simone walked her mother to the elevator. Eleanor leaned slightly on her daughter's arm. Not because she needed the support physically, but because she had been sitting alone for 26 minutes, holding her posture together, and now she didn't have to. You didn't have to come in uniform, Eleanor said quietly. Yes, I did, Simone said. The elevator doors closed. What Simone had not mentioned at the front desk, what she had decided, in the 8 seconds it took to cross the lobby, not to mention yet, was that before she walked in, she had made 2 phone calls from the parking garage. The first was to the Hargrove Grand's reservations line, where she had confirmed that her mother's reservation was visible, active and flagged with 0 outstanding issues. The agent she spoke to was confused about why she was calling. The second call was to Desmond Abubakar, the Regional Vice President of Guest Experience for Hargrove Hotel's Southeast Division. Desmond was a former client of Simone's from a civil matter 3 years earlier. They had stayed in loose professional contact. She had reached him on the first try, explained what was happening in 32 words, and he had said, "I'll be on a call with that property in 20 minutes. Desmond Abubakar's call arrived at the Hargrove Grand front desk at 10:47 a.m., while Fenn was writing up what he planned to characterize internally as a routine verification escalation. The call was not routine. Abubakar had reviewed the reservation, reviewed the transaction history, reviewed the check-in log time stamped against when the reservation had actually been processed, and had a very clear picture of what had happened. He asked Fenn 4 questions. Fenn answered them. Then, Abubakar said something Fenn had never heard a regional vice president say to him before. And the call ended. In the Magnolia Suite, on the 22nd floor, Eleanor Voss-Drummond stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows and looked out at Atlanta. The city spread beneath her, the Buckhead skyline softening into the tree canopy of Midtown, the morning light, turning everything amber. The suite was everything her daughter had described. Cream and gold, a living room, a king bed visible through an open doorway, a bouquet of white peonies on the coffee table. Simone. Eleanor turned from the window. What did you do? Nothing yet, Simone said. She was standing near the door, still in uniform, arms crossed, not in the way people cross their arms when they're defensive, but in the way soldiers stand when they're deciding sequentially. I made some calls. Don't make it worse, Mama. Simone uncrossed her arms. She walked to the window and stood beside her mother. Below them, a rideshare was pulling up. A family with matching luggage climbed out. Normal Saturday morning, the world doing its regular business. Do you remember what you used to tell me when I was deployed? Every time I called from overseas and said I was fine. Eleanor looked at her. I said you couldn't be fine, because none of it was fine. You said the worst thing you can do when something is wrong is pretend it isn't, because that just hands the power back to the people who did it. Simone turned back to the window. He looked at you and decided you didn't belong here, without checking, without verifying. Before you said a single word, that's what happened, and if we leave without saying so, the next woman who walks through that door gets the same thing. Eleanor was quiet for a long time. How long will it take? She finally asked. Couple of days, Simone said. Maybe a week. I'd like to go to the spa at 2 o'clock. You'll be at the spa at 2 o'clock. Eleanor looked at her daughter, the uniform, the oak leaves, the quiet authority that she had watched grow from a fierce, determined girl into a woman who walked into rooms like they already belonged to her. She thought of Wendell, who would have loved to see this. She thought of the chair by the window downstairs, where she had sat and kept her back straight for 26 minutes. All right, Eleanor said. Do what you need to do. What Simone needed to do unfolded methodically over the next 48 hours. It started with the formal written complaint she filed with Hargrove Hotel's corporate guest experience office, time-stamped 11:15 a.m. Saturday, itemized the sequence of events with the precision of someone who had spent 22 years writing legal documents for the United States Army. The complaint named Colton by his full name. She had photographed his name tag on the way out and named Fenn, and included the check-in log timestamps, the reservation confirmation, and a request for the property's camera footage from the lobby between 9:44 and 10:18 a.m. It also included a note at the bottom, written in the clipped formal language of JAG correspondence, explaining that Colonel Drummond Voss was a legal officer currently on active duty and would be pursuing this matter through every appropriate channel, civilian and otherwise, and that she was documenting this as a potential violation of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Section 42, as the refusal to honor a valid reservation and the direction to a secondary waiting area occurred immediately upon visual assessment of the guest with no procedural justification. The complaint was forwarded up the Hargrove Hotel's chain within 3 hours. Not because Simone was a colonel, she had filed it as a private citizen, but because the legal language in the final paragraph had the property's corporate counsel on the phone with Abubakar by 2 p.m. At 3:30 p.m., while Eleanor was in the spa's hot stone room, Simone received a call from a woman named Patricia Crane, Senior Vice President of Guest Relations for Hargrove Hotels North America. The conversation lasted 19 minutes. Crane was professional, genuinely apologetic in the way that people are when they know they're looking at real exposure, and very interested in understanding what had happened. She asked if Simone had any evidence beyond the timestamp log. Simone mentioned that she had made a call from the parking garage to the reservations line before entering the lobby, and that the call was recorded, as all reservation line calls are. Crane went quiet for a moment. "I'd like to make this right," Crane said finally. "I appreciate that," Simone said. "There are a few things that would constitute making it right. The first was a formal written apology to Eleanor Voss-Drummond, not templated, not corporate. A specific named acknowledgement of what occurred and why it was wrong. The second was a full refund of the reservation cost, which Simone immediately directed should be donated to the National Veterans Legal Services Program, rather than returned to her account. The third was mandatory training for the Buckhead Properties front desk staff on reservation verification protocols, documented and reported back to her within 60 days. The fourth was the most unusual. Simone asked that Colton and Fenn both be required to read, in full, the Hargrove Hotel's founding statement, which was printed on a plaque in the lobby that Eleanor had actually paused to read while waiting. The one that said the hotel had been built on the principle that every guest deserves to be received with dignity, regardless of background or appearance. She wanted them to respond in writing to that statement in the context of what had happened. Crane didn't say no to any of it. "And my mother," Simone added, almost as an afterthought, "should have a very good weekend." Eleanor had a very good weekend. Sunday morning, she ordered room service and ate on the terrace, watching the city wake up. Sunday afternoon, she had a dinner reservation at the restaurant with the waiting list, and Simone arrived out of uniform, for the first time, in a dark blue dress, and they stayed for 3 hours. The sommelier remembered Eleanor from the check-in story. By then, the front desk staff apparently talked of little else, and brought a complimentary glass of something that cost more than Eleanor's plane ticket. She drank it slowly, watching her daughter across the table, thinking about things that don't have words exactly. That Monday, Gareth Fenn submitted his resignation. Hargrove Hotels did not accept it immediately. They kept him on paid administrative leave, pending a full internal review of guest interaction logs at the property, going back 18 months. The review, as these things tend to do, found more than Fenn had planned. Colton was not fired. He was reassigned to back-of-house operations, while the training Simone had requested was designed and implemented. This is the part that Simone had specifically asked Crane to consider, not destruction, but correction. "He's young," she had said on the call. "What I want is for him to understand what he did, not lose his livelihood. Understand it." This was the detail that surprised people most when the story got out, because it did get out. It wasn't Simone who told it. It was Eleanor. She mentioned it to her friend group at her church in Macon. The women she had known for 40 years, her prayer circle, the ones who had sat with her when Wendell died. And one of those women mentioned it to her granddaughter, who worked in social media for a civil rights nonprofit. And within a week, the story was moving through the community in the particular way that true stories move. Not virally, not explosively, but steadily, from person to person, carrying its own weight. What people responded to wasn't the rank, it wasn't the colonel, or the uniform, or the legal threat. What people responded to was the 26 minutes. 26 minutes of Eleanor Voss-Drummond sitting with her back, straight in a chair she shouldn't have been directed to, holding her dignity together by force of will, 71 years old in pearl earrings, in a hotel her daughter had paid for, in a lobby with a plaque about dignity on the wall. That was the image people couldn't shake. Not the confrontation, the waiting. Simone read the comments and messages for a day and then stopped. Not because they hurt, but because they didn't. They confirmed something she had always known, and the confirmation, after a while, becomes its own kind of weight. What she kept instead was a photo her mother had sent her from the terrace Sunday morning. Eleanor in the cream linen blazer, coffee cup in both hands, the Atlanta skyline behind her, the light catching the pearls. She was looking out at the city with an expression that had nothing tentative in it, nothing apologetic, just a woman exactly where she was supposed to be, knowing it completely. Simone kept the photo as her lock screen for 4 months. 3 weeks after the weekend, Eleanor received the written apology from Hargrove Hotels. It was 4 paragraphs, specific, unhedged, signed by Patricia Crane and countersigned by the hotel's board chairperson. It named what happened. It did not call it a misunderstanding. It did not say the staff had been trying to follow protocol. It said that Mrs. Voss-Drummond had been treated in a manner inconsistent with her dignity as a guest and as a person, and that the hotel was sorry. Eleanor read it twice. She folded it carefully and put it in the cedar box where she keeps the things that matter. Wendell's last letter, her children's birth announcements, the photograph from the Washington retirement ceremony. Then she called Simone. "I got the letter," she said. "Good," Simone said. "You didn't have to go this far. Mama, I know." A pause, the kind that carries 44 years of knowing each other. "Thank you. You kept your back straight for 26 minutes, Simone said. "I just made some phone calls." There is a particular kind of arrogance that assumes vulnerability. It looks at age and sees weakness. It looks at a worn purse and sees absence of worth. It looks at a woman alone in a lobby and decides without asking, without checking, without a single piece of evidence, that she doesn't belong. And it is always, always wrong. Not just morally, but practically, catastrophically wrong. Because it never asks the question it should ask first. Who is this person, really, and who loves her? Gareth Fenn looked at Eleanor Voss-Drummond and saw an obstacle. He didn't see 22 years of a husband deployed and a family held together. He didn't see 3 children raised and a son buried and a faith kept. He didn't see a daughter who had spent 2 decades learning exactly how to dismantle the kind of quiet, institutional cruelty that passes for policy. He saw what he expected to see, and he was wrong. Eleanor got her weekend. The pearls caught the light. The peonies were white and perfect on the coffee table. And somewhere in a parking garage in Buckhead, a colonel in service dress made 2 phone calls and walked through a lobby like she owned it because her mother was inside. And her mother deserved to be there. And there was no version of this story where that wasn't going to be true. If this story settled something in you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to Echoes of Justice, because the truth doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it walks in from a parking garage, still in uniform, and it doesn't raise its voice once. What would you have done in Simone's place? Tell us in the comments below.